not hiding, not ashamed, not positioned in the way of someone who has been caught somewhere they know they shouldn't be and is managing the geometry of their exposure. She was standing in my kitchen the way you stand in your own kitchen, hip against the counter, wine glass in her hand, the specific ease of someone who has been in this space enough times to know where the good glasses are kept and has helped herself to one. My wine, my glass, my kitchen. My husband standing between us with an expression on his face that I will spend the rest of my life trying to find a single word for and failing, because the expression contained so many things simultaneously: guilt and defiance, and the particular cruelty of a man who has made a decision and is angry at you for making the moment of its revelation uncomfortable for him. He said it before I could speak. Before I could process the full inventory of what I was seeing, the two glasses on the counter, the easy posture of her body, the way the kitchen smelled different, wrong, like someone else's perfume had been living in my house long enough to settle into the walls. He said it the way people say things they have rehearsed, which told me that this moment had been planned, that I was the only person in my kitchen who had not known it was coming. "Diane," he said, "we need to talk." And then, before I said a single word, before I asked a single question, before I did anything except stand in the doorway of my own kitchen with my work bag still on my shoulder, and my keys still in my hand and my heart, doing something I could not yet name because naming it would make it real, he said it. "Get out," Marcus said. "Take those things you call kids that bind us together and get out of my house." The woman at the counter took a sip of my wine. I want to tell you what happened in my body in that exact moment because I think it matters. I think the body's response to the unsurvivable is one of the most honest things a human being ever experiences, and I want to tell you the truth of mine. My hands stopped working, not trembling, stopped, like the signal from my brain to my fingers had been interrupted by something too large traveling through the same system. My vision went very clear, which is the opposite of what you might expect, but trauma does that sometimes, strips everything to its essential lines, removes the soft focus of ordinary perception, and replaces it with a terrible HD. I could see everything. The condensation ring her wine glass had left on my counter. The specific way she was looking at me, not with guilt, not with the decency of someone who is ashamed. With the evaluating look of someone who has heard about you for a long time and is now comparing the reality to the description. My children were upstairs. Amara, 11, who was probably doing homework with her headphones in, who had her father's focus and my stubbornness, and who was at the age where she understood more than we thought she did. Elijah, 9, who was probably playing video games with the volume too high, who laughed like his grandfather and cried at movies he would deny crying at, who still climbed into our bed during thunderstorms, because some fears are honest regardless of age. And Maya, 4 years old, who was probably already asleep because Maya went to bed at 7:30, with the reliability of a child who has decided sleep is wonderful, and she intends to commit to it fully. My children were upstairs, and their father had just called them things. He had called them things that bind him, like they were rope, like they were chains, Like the three people I had grown in my body and loved with every resource I possessed were not people, but objects of inconvenient constraint. I looked at Marcus Carter, the man I had married 6 years ago, the man who had held Amara the day she was born and cried in a way I had never seen him cry before or since, who had been in the delivery room for Elijah and had cut the cord with hands that were shaking, who had been the first person to make Maya laugh, a real laugh, at 3 weeks old, and who had called me at 2 in the afternoon on a workday just to tell me about it because it was too good to wait. I looked at this man and I understood for the first time that knowing someone and understanding them are entirely different categories of knowledge. "Move," I said. He was blocking the door. "We need to talk about this, move away from my door," I said. Behind him, the woman put her wine glass down on my counter. She had the grace, finally, to look somewhere else. If this opening has already put something in your chest that you don't have a name for yet, stay. Subscribe to this channel right now before we go one word further. We tell the stories that are too real, too raw, too true for anywhere else. Drop your name and your city in the comments below. People are watching this from everywhere and every single one of you matters. Now, let's go back. Because the story of how Diane Carter got to that kitchen doorway is the story of how the most carefully constructed deceptions are always built on the truest foundations. And the twist at the end of this story, I promise you, will change everything. I need to take you back 6 years. Not to the wedding, though we'll get there. Back to the year before the wedding, to the specific Tuesday evening when Marcus Carter sat across from me at a restaurant we couldn't quite afford and told me he wanted to build something with me. Not just a marriage, not just a family, something. He used that word with the specific weight of a person who means it expansively. Something that was larger than the two of us, that would outlast the two of us, that would be the evidence that we had been here and had done something worthwhile with the being here. I believed him. I want to be precise about this. I believed him not naively, not from the credulous hope of someone who has never been disappointed, but from the evidence-based belief of someone who had been watching Marcus Carter for 2 years and had found him to be exactly who he presented himself as being. He was consistent. He was present. He remembered the things I told him and brought them back to me weeks later, which is one of the most intimate things a person can do, to demonstrate that your words did not disappear into them but stayed and mattered. He showed up. Not just physically, emotionally. He was there for the hard things and the ordinary things and the things that weren't anything at all except the daily texture of a shared life. I had been careful about love my whole life. Careful in the way that people who have watched love fail are careful, not closed, not cynical, but deliberate. Watching and waiting for the evidence before extending the full weight of what I felt. Marcus had accumulated that evidence over 2 years, and I had reviewed it and I had concluded, this person is safe. This person is real. This is what building something looks like. We got married. We bought a house, a 4-bedroom colonial in a neighborhood with good schools and neighbors who brought food when someone was sick, and a park 2 blocks away that Amara would eventually learn to ride her bike in, and that Elijah would eventually fall out of a tree in and require 4 stitches and a lot of dignity management. We built the something Marcus had described. We built it together, contribution by contribution, the way you build anything real. What I did not know was the architecture of what was being built in parallel. Her name was Simone Bradley. She was 32 years old, which meant she had been 26 when Marcus and I got married, which meant she had been part of his life. In some capacity, I was still piecing together on the night in the kitchen before the wedding, before Amara, before the tears in the delivery room and the phone call about Maya's first laugh, and every ordinary, extraordinary moment of the life I believed we were building together. I learned this not on the night in the kitchen. The night in the kitchen was the conclusion of a story I had been living without knowing I was in it. I learned the full shape of it later in pieces, each piece landing the way pieces of large truths land, not all at once, which would be almost merciful, but one at a time, each one requiring you to revise the entire picture you have been holding. Let me tell you about the year before the kitchen. The year before the kitchen was the year Marcus changed. Changed is not quite the right word because I know now that he did not change, he shifted. He moved something that had been positioned carefully for 6 years, and the movement was subtle enough that I spent months telling myself I was misreading it, that I was tired, that the stress of 3 children and 2 careers and a mortgage was producing a distortion in my perception that made ordinary variations in a marriage look like symptoms of something wrong. He started working late. This is such a cliché that I am embarrassed to write it, but it is what happened, and the cliché is a cliché precisely, because it is the most reliable camouflage available to a person conducting a deception. It is both the most obvious thing and the most difficult thing to challenge because work is real and deadlines are real, and the accusation of lying about work feels, when you make it, like an accusation that says more about your own insecurity than about their behavior. He started putting his phone face down. Again, cliché. Again, I noticed and told myself I was being paranoid. Again, the work of the deception is not in the act, but in the narrative the deceived person builds to explain away the evidence. And I was very good at building narratives because I was very good at most things I applied myself to, and I had applied myself to this marriage with everything I had. He started being less present in the way that is harder to name and therefore harder to address, not absent exactly, not neglectful, not unkind, just slightly removed, a millimeter further away than he used to be, a half-second slower to laugh at the things that used to make him laugh immediately. A quality to his attention when we were together that felt like he was in the room and somewhere else simultaneously, like he was keeping one window open in his mind that was not this room and not me. I noticed. I asked. He reassured. I believed the reassurance because I wanted to and because the alternative, that the reassurance was a performance, was a thing I was not ready to know. My best friend, Keisha, said it to me directly about 7 months before the kitchen. We were having lunch, and she was looking at me with the specific expression of someone who has been holding information that belongs to someone else and is deciding whether the kindness of telling outweighs the violence of it. "Diane," she said, "I need to ask you something." "Okay," I said, "how are things with Marcus?" Good, I said. Normal, a little distant lately, but we've both been busy and Diane, she said again. And the second time she said my name, it had a different weight in it. The weight of what she was about to say. Don't, I said. She stopped. Don't tell me, I said. Not yet, I'm not ready. She looked at me for a long moment. Okay, she said. But when you are, I know, I said. I know, Keisha. I had known. I had known in the way you know things that are too expensive to know, in the body first, before the mind. In the specific chill that happens when your nervous system registers danger before your conscious mind is willing to. I had known, and I had chosen not to know because I had 3 children and a mortgage, and 11 years of a life that was not just mine, but theirs, and dismantling it required a certainty I had not yet gathered enough evidence to feel entitled to. 7 months later, the evidence came to me in my kitchen, delivered by Marcus himself, with Simone Bradley at the counter and my wine in her hand. Stay with this story. Because I know what you're thinking you know where this goes. The betrayed wife, the other woman, the divorce, the rebuilding, you think you know the shape. I need you to stay because the shape of this story is nothing like what you're expecting. Subscribe right now. Drop your city in the comments. Share this with one person. Because the twist, the thing that happens 8 months after that kitchen, is the reason this story exists. Now, back to Diane. Back to the door. Marcus moved away from the door. Not because I had convinced him, or because he felt remorse, or because the situation had produced in him any recognizable form of human decency. He moved because Simone Bradley touched his arm, the specific gentle pressure of a woman redirecting a man she knows how to manage, and said quietly, "Let her go, baby." Baby, in my kitchen, in my house, baby. I walked up the stairs. I did not run. Running would have been a concession to the chaos he had created in my carefully ordered life, and I had decided, in the 10 seconds between the door moving and my foot hitting the first stair, that I would not give Marcus Carter or Simone Bradley the satisfaction of my disorder. I would move through my own house with the same steadiness I had moved through everything else that had tried to take me apart. I went to Maya's room first. She was asleep. Of course she was. It was 7:45 and Maya committed to sleep. I stood in her doorway in the dark, and I looked at her small, round face against her pillow, and I felt something pass through me that was too big and too complicated for the moment. So I pressed it down and filed it and went to Elijah's room. He had his headphones on. He was not asleep. He was playing a handheld game under the covers with a flashlight, which was a rule violation that on any other evening I would have addressed with the specific tired amusement of a mother who knows her children and their particular varieties of rule bending. I stood in his doorway, and he felt my presence the way children feel their mother's presence, through whatever frequency is specific to that bond, and he looked up. "Mom, put the game away, baby," I said. "It's late." He studied my face. Elijah had always been the reader of the family, the one who paid attention to what faces were doing, who asked the questions that told you he had been watching longer than you realized. "You okay?" he said. "I'm okay," I said. "Go to sleep." He put the game away. Amara was not asleep. Amara, my 11-year-old, was sitting at her desk with her homework and her headphones and her back to the door. But when I knocked, she pulled the headphones down and turned around, and I saw in her face what I had been afraid to see, the specific, careful expression of a child who has been hearing things through floors and walls, and has been sitting with what she heard, and is waiting to see what her mother's face will tell her about how afraid to be. "Amara," I said. "I heard them downstairs," she said. She said it simply and without drama, the way children say things they have decided to be matter of fact about because the alternative is too frightening. "I know," I said. "I'm handling it." "Who is she?" I looked at my 11-year-old daughter, who had her father's focus and my stubbornness, and who was looking at me with eyes that were too old for what she was asking and the right age for being my daughter. "Someone who doesn't matter," I said, which was the best I could do in that moment, which was not the truth but was not a lie exactly either, because what Simone Bradley was to me in that moment was not a person but a symptom, and symptoms do not matter the way the disease matters. I went back downstairs. Marcus was alone in the kitchen. Simone had gone, her wine glass was in the sink, rinsed, which was a detail I noted with the specific numb comprehensiveness with which I was noting everything, because she had rinsed it, which meant she knew where the sink was without looking, which meant she knew my kitchen, which meant she had been here before, which meant that the children playing and doing homework above our heads had been in the same house as this woman, potentially multiple times, without knowing it. "She left," Marcus said. Informative, as though he were telling me the mail had come. "I want you to tell me," I said. "How long?" He looked at the counter. "Diane, how long, Marcus?" The pause before he answered was its own answer. It was too long for this to be something that had started recently. It had the weight of something settled, something established, something that had been running parallel to our marriage long enough to have its own routines and its own language and apparently its own access to my kitchen and my wine. 4 years, he said. I sat down, not because I chose to, but because my legs made a unilateral decision that standing was no longer a viable position. 4 years. Amara had been 7. Elijah had been 5. Maya had been 4 months old. 4 years, I said. Diane, I know, 4 months after Maya was born, I said. You started this 4 months after Maya was born. He looked at the counter again. It wasn't, he started, and then stopped, because whatever he was about to say to make this smaller than it was could not survive contact with the number 4 and the number 4 months and the image of him in the delivery room cutting the cord with shaking hands. Get out, I said. This is my house. Get out of this kitchen right now, I said. And don't you say another word about whose house this is tonight. He went to the living room. I sat in my kitchen for 22 minutes. I know it was 22 minutes because I was looking at the clock above the stove and counting, the way you count sometimes when the alternative to counting is something you are not ready for. Then I called Keisha. She answered on the second ring. Diane, you knew, I said. Yes, she said. How long have you known? About 8 months, she said. I saw them at a restaurant. I should have told you sooner and come over, I said. Please. I'm already in my car, she said. What followed the kitchen was 11 months of the specific devastation of a life being legally, financially, and emotionally disassembled. I want to tell you the truth of those 11 months because the truth matters and because the sanitized version, the montage of a strong woman rebuilding, scored with empowering music, is an insult to anyone who has actually been through it. The truth was, I did not feel strong for a long time. I felt like someone who had been living in a building they believed was structurally sound and had discovered, standing in the rubble, that the foundation had been compromised for 4 years, and that every ordinary moment they had lived inside that building, every dinner and bedtime story and Saturday morning and anniversary, had been happening on top of something that was already broken. I felt stupid. This is the one that nobody talks about, and I am going to talk about it because it is real, and because the shame of feeling stupid compounds the original injury, and that compound injury is what keeps people silent, and silence is not something I am interested in. I felt stupid because I had not known, because I had been in the building and I had not seen the foundation. Because I had noticed things, the phone face down, the distance, the late nights, and had told myself stories about them instead of looking more directly. My therapist, Dr. Rachel Moore, said something to me in our 3rd session that I have returned to many times since. The fact that you didn't know is not evidence of your stupidity. It is evidence of his sophistication. Deception that is maintained over 4 years in a marriage with 3 children requires sustained effort and skill. You didn't fail to see it. He worked to prevent you from seeing it. I held that. It took a long time to hold it without it slipping. Marcus moved out into an apartment. The children went between the 2 houses on a schedule that was determined by lawyers, and that Amara described once as feeling like she was a library book being checked out and returned, which was the most precise and devastating description of shared custody I have ever heard, and which I repeated to my lawyer the next morning because Amara's precision deserved to be part of the record. Elijah stopped talking about his father for approximately 6 weeks. Not because he was asked to, not because anyone told him to, he just stopped. The way children stop talking about things that are too complicated for their available language. And the silence was its own communication that I tried to hold without interpreting too heavily. Maya, at 4, understood the least and felt the most, the way very young children do. She had no framework for what was happening, except that something in the house had changed, and the change had not been explained to her in terms she could fully hold. And so, she cried at bedtime more than she used to, and she needed to be held more than she used to, and I held her every time because holding her was the one thing that was uncomplicated in a life that was otherwise all complication. Marcus, in the months after the kitchen, oscillated between guilt and resentment in a pattern I recognized from the marriage. The same oscillation that had produced the late nights and the phone face down and the millimeter of distance. The oscillation of a man who wants to be free of accountability for his own choices and is angry at the people his choices have hurt for making freedom impossible. He told our mutual friend, David, that I had always been difficult. He told David that the marriage had been unhappy for a long time and that I had been too focused on my career and not present enough. He told David these things knowing David would tell me, which meant the telling was not about David, it was about me. About reaching me through David with a version of events that would produce in me either doubt or capitulation. and about his specific failure to understand that I was no longer a person who could be managed by his narratives. I found this out from David, who told me with the transparent discomfort of a man who did not want to be in the middle of this, and was in the middle of it anyway. And I thanked him, and I processed what Marcus had said, and I had a conversation with Dr. Moore about it, and I moved on. Not because it didn't hurt, but because hurting and moving were not mutually exclusive. We are halfway through this story, and I need you to hear what's coming. Because what I have told you so far is the shape of a story you have heard before: betrayal, devastation, rebuilding. But in 8 months, something is going to happen that you have not heard before. Something that will make you question everything you thought you knew about Marcus Carter and Simone Bradley and the 4 years and the kitchen. Subscribe right now. Drop your name and your city in the comments. This community is built on stories like this one, and we want to know you're here. Now, stay. Simone Bradley became Marcus's girlfriend officially approximately 6 weeks after he moved out, which told me that the transition from affair to relationship had been planned alongside the kitchen confrontation. That the night in the kitchen was not a spontaneous revelation, but a scheduled execution, that Marcus had timed it, that he had brought her to my kitchen that night not because they had been careless, but because they had decided. The decision had been made. The exit had been planned. I had simply not been informed that my own life was operating on a timeline that other people had set. I heard about Simone through various channels over the following months. The way you hear about things in a shared social world, when the shared social world has not yet reorganized around the new configuration. She was a marketing consultant. She was pretty in the way of someone who has always known they were pretty and has organized a certain amount of their personality around that knowledge. She and Marcus were seen at restaurants, at events, at the kinds of places that exist in the overlap between professional and social life, where being seen together makes a statement that is intended to be received. I did not spend energy on Simone Bradley. I spent energy on my children and my work and my therapy and the morning runs that had become the 1 hour of the day that belonged entirely to me, that no lawyer or child or grief or anger could follow me into. I spent energy on rebuilding the thing that had been dismantled, not the marriage, which was not rebuilding but clearing, but myself, which was a different project with different materials. The divorce was finalized after 9 months. My lawyer, a woman named Patricia Ez, who had the specific quiet ferocity of someone who has seen every variety of marital dissolution, and has organized her responses into an efficient and devastating system, negotiated a settlement that reflected the truth of our financial contributions over 11 years, which meant it reflected mine significantly because I had been the primary income earner for 7 of those years, while Marcus built a business that had only recently begun to return what it cost. Marcus contested the financial settlement. This surprised me and did not surprise me. He had always had the specific relationship with money that people have when they have grown up without enough of it, and have spent their adult lives arranging their identity around the having of it, which means the money is never just money, but something more loaded and more fragile that requires defense. Patricia handled the contesting with the efficiency of someone who has seen this before and finds it tedious. The settlement went through. The house stayed with me and the children, which was the thing that mattered most because the house was not just a building, but Elijah's 4 stitches and Maya's first steps and Amara's height measurements penciled on the kitchen door frame and all of the other accumulated physical evidence of our children's lives that I was not going to let a calendar of infidelity remove them from. I was 7 months out from the kitchen when Keisha called me on a Thursday morning. "Diane," she said. "What?" I said. I knew the tone. You need to hear this from me before you hear it from anyone else. I put my coffee cup down. "Simone Bradley is pregnant," she said. I sat with that for a moment. "Okay," I said. "Diane, I heard you," I said. "I'm okay. You don't have to be okay." "I know," I said, "but I am." And the strange thing, the thing that surprised me, was that I mostly was. Not because it didn't register, not because it was nothing, but because I had spent 7 months doing the work of disentangling my well-being from Marcus Carter's choices, and the work had produced something real. His choices were his choices. Their consequences were their consequences. The pregnancy was information about his life, not mine. "There's more," Keisha said. I waited. "She was pregnant before the kitchen," Keisha said, "by about 3 weeks. I sat very still. "So the night he came home with her, she was already pregnant," Keisha confirmed. "And Diane, apparently she's been telling people that Marcus had told her that his marriage was already over, that you two had been essentially separated for a year before that night, that the confrontation in the kitchen was just the formal announcement of something that had already ended." I looked at the wall of my kitchen. The wall that still had Amara's height mark from last April, measured on the inside of the door frame with a pencil and the date written in my handwriting. "He staged it," I said, slowly, each word finding its weight. "He brought her to my kitchen when she was pregnant to force a confrontation because he needed the marriage to end publicly enough to—" I stopped. "To what?" "To establish that he left you," Keisha said. "Not that you kicked him out. He needed it to look like he ended it. For her." For she paused. "Diane, I think he told her things about you and your marriage that weren't true, for a long time, and I think she believed them. And I think the baby changed the timeline." I sat with this new architecture of the thing for a long time. The kitchen had not been a revelation. It had been a performance. The getting out, the things, the blocking of the door, all of it staged. All of it designed to produce a specific outcome that served Marcus Carter's needs, which were, as his needs had always been at their core, about Marcus Carter. What I did not know yet, what none of us knew, was what was about to happen to Simone Bradley. The twist arrived 8 months after the kitchen, on a Friday afternoon, in the form of a phone call I was not expecting from a number I did not recognize. "Is this Diane Carter?" A woman's voice. Careful. The specific carefulness of someone who has decided to make a call they have been considering for a long time. "This is Diane," I said. "My name is Simone Bradley," she said. I did not speak. "I know you have no reason to talk to me," she said. "I know, but I need to tell you something, and I need to tell you directly because I've spent 8 months being told things by someone else and I'm done with that." I sat down. "I'm listening," I said. What Simone Bradley told me took 45 minutes, and I will try to compress it without losing what mattered. The essential facts were these. Simone had met Marcus 4 years ago, as I knew. What she had not known, what she had been told the opposite of, was that his marriage was healthy. She had been told from the beginning that he was in a loveless arrangement, that he and I had not been truly married in any real sense for years, that he was staying for the children and for financial reasons, and that he was miserable, and that she was the first real thing in his life in a long time. She had believed him. Not naively, she had asked questions. She had pushed back. She had said on multiple occasions that she would not continue if he was not being honest with her. He had continued to be honest with her in the specific way that sophisticated liars are honest, which is to say, he had given her enough truth to make the lies credible. She had not known about Amara's height on the door frame. She had not known about Elijah's stitches or Maya's laugh. She had not known that I had been the primary earner for 7 years or that we had been at counseling twice in our marriage, both times at my instigation, both times with Marcus participating with what I had believed at the time was genuine effort. She had been told she was the first. She had not been the first. There was someone before me, she said. I found this out 3 months ago. Someone in the 2 years before you got married. He ended it when you got pregnant with your first. She contacted me. She had seen a photograph of me with Marcus online, and she needed me to know. I closed my eyes. He has a type, Simone said. He finds women who are accomplished and independent and who have enough of their own lives that they don't need too much from him, which means they don't look too closely. He tells them a version of himself and a version of his situation that makes them feel like they are the clarity in his complicated life. And then when the situation shifts, when something happens that changes the calculus, he rearranges everything and everyone gets cast in a new role without being told. The baby had been the shifting of the calculus. The pregnancy had changed what Simone needed from Marcus, which had changed what Marcus needed to do about his marriage, which had produced the kitchen. I am not calling you to apologize for him, she said. He needs to do that himself, and I have told him so. I'm calling because I am 8 months pregnant and I am looking at what I have gotten myself into, and I needed to talk to one person in this situation who I believe was told the truth even less than I was. What do you mean? I said. I mean, she said carefully, that Marcus told me you knew, that you had known for 2 years, that you had chosen to stay for financial reasons, that the marriage was a business arrangement that you were both maintaining for appearances. She paused. I believed him. But 3 months ago, when the woman from before reached out to me, I started going back through everything. All the things he told me about you. And I started asking myself how many of them I had verified versus how many I had taken on faith because it was easier and because questioning them would have required me to question everything. She was quiet for a moment. I questioned everything. And, I said, and I think he lied to both of us, she said. In different ways and for different purposes. But both of us were operating from a version of reality that he curated specifically to produce the behavior from each of us that he needed. I thought about Marcus in the delivery room with Maya, cutting the cord. I thought about the phone calls, the restaurant where he said he wanted to build something, the height marks on the door frame, the 11 years of what I had believed was a real marriage. He didn't want a marriage, I said slowly. He wanted a certain kind of life, and both of us were components of that life. You were what he wanted, I was what he needed. And when the pregnancy changed what you needed from him, he tried to remove the component that was now the obstacle, she said. The marriage, the house, you, she paused, the things he called kids. I sat with the full shape of it for a moment. The 4 years and the kitchen and the staging of the confrontation and the woman before Simone and the pattern of it. The patient, sophisticated, long-term pattern of a man who had been constructing a specific life by managing specific people into specific positions and who had been doing it so smoothly, and for so long that none of us had been able to see the whole architecture from where we were standing inside it. "Why are you telling me this?" I said. "Because I have a daughter coming," she said. "In 6 weeks, and I need to understand who her father actually is, not who he told me he was. And the clearest picture of who he actually is exists in the person who was closest to him for the longest time." A pause. "And because I think you deserve to know that you were not stupid. You were managed." I thought about Dr. Moore, about what she had said in the 3rd session. He worked to prevent you from seeing it. "I know," I said. "I'm starting to believe it." We talked for another 20 minutes. About the practical things, the baby, the custody arrangement she was now navigating, the lawyer she had engaged, the specific and terrible irony of finding herself in a position adjacent to the one she had been the instrument of creating for me 8 months earlier. She did not ask for my sympathy, and I did not offer it wholesale. What I offered was something more useful. The name of Patricia as my lawyer, who had the quiet ferocity and the efficient devastation, and who would ensure that Simone Bradley's daughter had what she was entitled to from her father. What I felt at the end of that call was not what you might expect. Not triumph, not vindication, not the satisfaction of having been proven right. What I felt was something quieter and more complicated. The specific grief of a woman looking at the full shape of what had been done, not just to her, but to all of them, and understanding that the source of all of it was a man who had been so committed to the management of his own image and the satisfaction of his own needs that he had been incapable of the simplest and most fundamental requirement of the relationships he had built: honesty. Marcus Carter came to my house 6 weeks after Simone's call. His daughter had been born, a healthy girl he named Isabel, which I noted with the specific calm of someone who no longer has territory in another person's naming decisions. He came to pick up the children for his weekend, and he stood in my doorway and I looked at him, and I thought about everything Simone had told me, and about the woman before Simone, and about the 11 years, and the building on the compromised foundation. "Diane," he said, "I think we need to talk." "We do," I said. "Come in." He came in. He sat at the kitchen table. I sat across from him. The height marks were still on the door frame. I had decided when I considered painting over them to leave them. "I know Simone called you," he said. "Yes." "Whatever she told you, Marcus," I said. "I'm going to say something and I need you to hear it without responding for a moment." He looked at me. "I know what you did," I said. "Not the affair, I knew about that the night of the kitchen. I mean the architecture of it, the woman before Simone, the way you managed what each of us knew so that none of us could see the whole picture, the staging of the kitchen confrontation, the things you told Simone about our marriage and the things you told mutual friends about me after, the pattern of it. I looked at him. I know the full shape of it now. He was quiet for a long time. I'm not saying this to fight, I said. I'm past the fight. I'm saying it because our children are going to grow up knowing their father. And the father they know needs to be someone who is, at some point, capable of being honest about who he is. Not for me, for them. I paused. Amara already knows more than you think she knows. Elijah is watching everything. And Maya is going to grow up and ask questions, and she deserves answers that are true. He looked at the table. I'm not the enemy, I said. I never was. I was the wife. I was the person you told, on a Tuesday evening at a restaurant we couldn't afford, that you wanted to build something with. I believed you. I built it. And then I found out that you were building something else with someone else at the same time, and that neither of us had been given the real blueprint. I paused. That is what I have to live with. And what you have to live with is that the children you called things are going to grow up and understand what happened, and the only question is whether they will understand it from a father who is honest about his failures or from the accumulation of evidence over a lifetime. He looked up at me. I was wrong, he said. Yes, I said, you were. Not just the affair, he said. All of it, the way he stopped. The way I managed things instead of being honest about them. I told myself I was protecting people, but I was protecting myself. I've known that for a while. I know you've known it, I said. The knowing isn't enough. The doing something with the knowing is enough. He went into the living room to get the children. I heard Elijah's voice rise with the specific joy of a child who loves his father and has missed him, and whose love is not contingent on the complicated adult failures his father has accumulated. I heard Maya launch herself at him with her characteristic total physical commitment, the way she hugged everything, all in, nothing reserved. I heard Amara's more measured greeting, the greeting of an 11-year-old who loves her father and is also watching him and has not decided yet how much of the watching to reveal. I stood in my kitchen and I listened to my children with their father, and I held the complicated truth of it. That love and failure exist in the same people. That the man who had called them things in this kitchen was also the man who had cried in the delivery room and called me about the laugh. That both of those things were true, and both of those things would be part of who my children were and what they understood about human beings. I did not cry. I had cried already, a great deal, in the appropriate places, with Dr. Moore and with Keisha, and occasionally alone in the shower where the water covered the sound. I had cried the amount the situation deserved, and then I had gotten up and I had moved, because crying and moving are not mutually exclusive, but they are sequential, and I was in the moving phase now. Here is what I know now, standing in the kitchen that is still mine, with the height marks still on the door frame, with Amara's mark from last month 2 inches above the one from last April. Being managed is not the same as being stupid. Being deceived is not the same as being naive. The people who are best at deception are not the ones who find stupid, naive people to deceive. They are the ones who find intelligent, trusting, invested people. Because intelligent, trusting, invested people are the most committed to the architecture of the thing they have built and the most reluctant to believe that the foundation was always compromised. Marcus Carter did not fool me because I was foolish. He maintained an elaborate deception because he is skilled at maintenance and because I believed in the marriage I was building, which is not a character flaw. Believing in something you have built with everything you have is not stupidity. It is love. And love is not something I intend to stop doing because someone used it against me. My children call me strong. Amara says it the way she says most things, directly, assessingly, as a statement of observed fact. Elijah says it in the way of someone who is proud and slightly awed, and is using the word to cover a range of feelings he doesn't have the language for yet. Maya says it with her whole body, the way she says everything, climbing onto my lap and putting both hands on my face and saying Mama strong with the absolute conviction of someone who has decided this is true and considers the matter closed. I accept it from all three of them. Not because I feel strong every day, I don't. Some mornings I wake up and the first thing I feel is the specific grief of a future that was taken, the future where the marriage was what I believed it was, and the children grew up in one house, and Marcus was the person I thought I was building something with. That grief is real, and I do not pretend it isn't. But I also wake up in the house that has the height marks on the door frame. In the house where the kitchen smells like me now, me, only mine. In the house where my children sleep and grow and measure themselves, and where Elijah's scar from the stitches is part of the story of this place, and where Maya is going to be both a veterinarian and a princess, and nobody has corrected her on this point. I wake up in a life that is mine, not the life I planned, not the life I built, but mine, claimed and rebuilt and ongoing and real. Simone Bradley and I are not friends. We are two women who were both lied to by the same man and who have both decided that the ongoing management of our children's lives requires a minimum of civility and a maximum of honesty. And we are both committed to that minimum and that maximum. Her daughter Isabel will grow up knowing she has siblings. My children will grow up knowing their father has another daughter. This was not the plan. The plan is not what we have. What we have is the truth. And the truth, even when it is more expensive than the lie it replaces, is what you can build on. I am Diane Carter. I am 38 years old now. I have 3 children who are taller every April than they were the April before, and I have a kitchen that is mine and a career that does not require anyone else's choices to support it, and a therapist who tells me things that cost me something to hear, and that I am learning, slowly and imperfectly, to receive. And I have this. The morning I woke up and understood that the door Marcus blocked was not the only door in my house. That the getting out he demanded of his presence, of his management, of the version of myself that existed in relation to his needs, was not the devastation he intended it to be. It was the beginning. That is Diane's story. And if you have been in a kitchen like hers, if you have heard words like those words, directed at you or at your children, I want you to hear this clearly. The door they block is not the only door. The story they tell about you is not the true story. The thing they call you is not what you are subscribed to this channel right now. We are here every single week with stories that tell the truth about what surviving looks like, not the clean version, the real one. Drop your name and your city in the comments below. We want to know who is in this room. We read every single comment and every single name matters. Share this video with one person today. One person who is sitting in a kitchen somewhere trying to decide whether what they know is real. Tell them it's real. Tell them the door is not the only door. And next week, we are bringing you the story of a woman who found a storage unit her husband had been paying for secretly for 6 years. What was inside, it was not what she expected. What it told her about the man she married changed the entire history of her life. We're calling it the storage unit he paid for in secret for 6 years. What she found inside rewrote everything she thought was true. Set your reminder. You need to be here for this one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying. And to every mother whose children have been called things by someone who was supposed to love them, your children are not things. They are the height marks on the door frame. They are the evidence that you were here and that you built something real. And that something is still standing.